Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Back for another installment of R8 Mods. Today we're going to be working on the outboard 6S and 7s, the phase splitters, and then the voltage amplifier or the preamp tubes, the 6SL7s, and basically just replacing the resistors and the phase splitter cap, the tail of the phase splitter one, and that's it today. And so if you guys are looking for like a mod video, this isn't it. This is just kind of another slow video of me part by part replacing these resistors and capacitors and stuff inside this amp. So let's get busy working. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and work on the front end of the amp. First, I'm going to work on this phase splitter, the 6S and 7, and then the driver tube, the 6SL7. And we're going to save our little buddy over here, the voltage regulator, for last. And this board here is just for connecting up the different power sources. This is going to be the plate voltage or the secondary B+, and it just has a trace that wraps around to the back, and then these are like this little tag points. Instead of using tag strips, they use these little circuit boards. So we're going to get ready here and start taking this thing apart. And the nice thing on this part is you have the other channel to look at in case you get confused on where stuff came from or where it goes. And first I'm going to remove this coupling cap and just get it out of our way. Or not a coupling cap, it's the phase splitter cap. We're going to be reusing this little insulation, so you can go ahead and take that off. So now that we have that coupling cap out of the way, we can get in here and remove this plate resistor here. This is our 33K one. And we're probably just going to come in here and be careful you don't like lay the iron up against some of these other wires and burn them up while you're doing this. And like I said, we're probably going to go just replace these things one at a time so we don't have any confusion. And one thing that I do, and not everyone does this, but I measure every resistor that I put in an amplifier. And well, when you're using very high quality parts like these, you probably shouldn't have to do that. If you measure them, you know you're putting in the correct values. And this is one of the harder ones to get to. And then we need to connect this lead here that goes to the grid of the output tube and solder it back onto this point as well. Okay, the next resistor is going to be this big guy here, which is the shared cathode resistor. And this is we're using a 3-watt metal film cap here. And solder this guy in place. And obviously you don't have to solder it back to the exact same point, just wherever it's convenient, because this is basically the ground bus. So this is our next little guy here we're going to replace. And this is our 470K. And again, we're going to reuse the little insulating sleeves that they put on these. If nothing else, it helps us determine how long to make the leads. I'm going to bend these over just a little bit. And these tube sockets have an upper and a lower hole. You're welcome to utilize one or both of them as you see fit. Makes it easier for you to connect this stuff. There's that one. There's that one. I'm going to leave this kind of over this way because we got to come in here and put our coupling cap back in there. Next, just remove this resistor here. It's our 39K resistor. Okay, let me come in here and trim off the excess. And then solder this guy. Actually, let's go ahead and pull this over a little closer so we don't have so much exposed lead, just to make it a little neater. And come in and solder that little guy back in there. Clean a little bit of solder off that so we can stick that back through that hole there and come in and solder it in the upper hole of this little socket tab. Just like that. That's all good and connected. Then the last one is this little resistor here, which is actually part of the next two, but we're right here, so let's go ahead and, now this might take a little bit of heat because it's soldered right at the joint of these two big pieces. That, come up here and wind this around our ground again. And we did have a little solder blob fall off, but it's okay. That up. And then last we'll come back and put the coupling cap back in when we're done with the rest of this soldering. I want to make sure I don't burn this stuff up, so I think I'm going to get this little resistor in the back, our grid leak resistor, out of the way. It looks like they May have wrapped it around the terminal. And when you do that, sometimes you have to use the tip of the iron to kind of unwind the resistor so you can get it out of place. I'm going to zoom in here and show you this resistor. And see, here's another one that's just got the outer covering of it just chipping off of it. And this is a super low current part here that I have no idea why it's doing that. And that just, to me, shows these as being not really great quality resistors. So I'm going to go ahead and do this little guy in the middle because it's kind of hard to get to while I've got that other one out of the way. Like that. And this should be the 100K plate resistor for the first stage of the 6SL7. Here's one side. And then come in here. Get the other side. And then let's go ahead and do this one here in the front. And then we'll come back and do this one we took out in the back. This guy comes right over to here. We'll trim just a little bit of this off. And this guy's going to come in right there. And we come back and add a little blob of solder on top of this. So we got three things connected here at one little spot. And there we go. Now we just got to put this one little resistor here in the back in, and we're done. And then we don't want to forget about this little guy back here, trying to hide from us. This is our 100K cathode resistor on the cathode follower stage of the 6SL7. And then come over here and ground this little guy. And then we got one resistor left to put in, and the capacitor on the tail end of the phase splitter. I'll knock that little solder blob off. And then last but not least is our 220K grid leak resistor. Now you could actually probably make this resistor a higher value. A 470K would be perfectly fine. And you could probably go up to even a meg, given that the potentiometer is going to act like the main grid leak resistance to ground. But I'm just going to put back in here what they had in it, because I don't see any problem with using that in this amp, given that the input seems plenty sensitive on this thing. I'm going to move that guy over a little bit, give us a little more room to pop this one in. And there we go. And just to double check your work, they didn't mirror these so that each of these tubes is wired up the same way. So you can go back through and look at your colors and make sure that the resistors are all connected exactly where they're supposed to be on each end by looking at the other channel that you haven't touched yet to make sure that you're putting everything back just like it was. And now all we've got left is to install our new coupling cap, and this guy is going to go from right here and then up to our ground point. So let me bend this over. Now if you're using one of these Mundorf caps, you can tell if you're putting it in the right direction. This side should go to ground, so that like the signal is going through the cap in the direction of the writing. And that makes sure that the outside foil is connected to the right part. You want this connected to as close to ground as possible, which would be the outside foil, which is also the longer lead. So anyway, we're going to solder that little guy in right there. And there was a part of me that wanted to not put these in until later, but it seemed kind of silly to me to like pull that other capacitor out to work on this stuff and then just solder it back in and then have to come back later and solder this one in. And I don't think this position is going to have near the impact on the sonics of the amplifier as the coupling caps are, but we're changing them anyway because we're in here working on this. Also, make sure when you're soldering to this bus bar, this is a lot heavier wire. You might be tempted to just go, oh yeah, the solder is flowing, but it's not flowing onto the big wire, it's just flowing onto the little cap wire. So you want to make sure you hold the heat on there long enough so that you're actually melting the solder into this bus bar's solder. So there we go. We got the two front end tubes rewired. I'm going to go ahead and do the other channel off camera and go give a listen to this thing. And in the next video, we are going to tackle the voltage regulator center tube. And that's probably going to be a whole video into itself to explain how it's working. And it's one of the first real mods that we're going to do to this amp that should have a nice change to its sonic qualities. So let's wrap this up here. Well, that wraps up doing the front end of this amp other than the voltage regulator tube. And I think that deserves a video all into itself. That video is going to be more involved, and I'm going to be, showing schematics, and I'm going to be showing how that tube actually works and what its function is, and the mods we're going to be doing to that part of the amplifier to try to improve the sonic sound of this thing, which I think there's a way to do that. And I appreciate what the fruit guy was doing with his coupling cap put across, or the film cap put across, I think it was pin 5 and ground of the 6SL7s, but I believe there's a better way of doing what he was trying to do with that, and that's separating the two channels, that we can actually separate the two channels in the front end of this amp through that 6S and 7 voltage regulator tube. So stay tuned for that. I think that's going to be interesting. I am going to run the audio analyzer suite again on this amp now that we've replaced the resistors and the tail of the phase splitter cap on one channel, and see if there's any change in the distortion, etc., the noise, because I can do a THD plus noise, and so I can tell if changing these resistors has lowered the noise floor of the amplifier. So that'll be interesting. Plus, I want to make sure as we go along that both channels stay the same or similar. They weren't identical to start with, which in a tube amp is rarely going to happen. You're going to see a little difference from one channel to the other, even if you get like all matched tubes and all that stuff. There's too many variables in vacuum tubes for them to ever be like identical. So anyway, if you're enjoying this content, please subscribe, please like the video, and we'll see you soon. Have a nice day.